Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. All of us have some type of fear. If you don't think you do, think deeper. Some type of fear. Some of us have phobias, and sometimes that can put a block up or a challenge in our lives and moving forward and really enjoying life. And for that, there is hypnotherapy. It helps with so many other modalities like quitting smoking, weight control, anxiety, depression. Why can't it help with fears and phobias? And it can. And she can help you. She is a certified hypnotist, hypnotherapist, and also a nurse practitioner. And she's back with us. Victoria Deeks is here. Welcome back. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I am good. I am good.
Yeah.
So, fears and phobias, they're kind of the same in terms of they trigger us and put us not at ease, but the complete opposite of that, just on alert. How does that look to you in terms of what they are?
So fears, I feel like people can identify fears pretty readily. Phobias kind of seem to be more complex to people. It's just into this overwhelming emotional reaction to something that is out of perspective to what is going on.
Where do they originate from? Of course, we could have a fear of flying, and that's got to come from somewhere. These things don't just pop up, right?
Right.
There's something traceable to it.
Yeah. So I think a lot of things, like I think you said, come from childhood events, and the sometimes if somebody's, I find if people have really kind of fought themselves over the issue, it can make it even more pressing to them that they can't override it or they haven't found that mechanism.
Why don't we look at one of them? Let's look at fear of flying, because I had a friend that had issues with that. We would travel for business. She would be the last one on the plane. I don't know how that helped.
Yeah.
It helped her at the time. And I would just sit there waiting at the gate, waiting for everybody to get on the plane, and then she would get on. She overcame that very slowly. But I don't know where that originated from in her. This is somewhat crazy, but I guess we can't judge anybody. I've heard of some pilots having a fear of heights,
Uh-huh.
but they can fly a plane. But when you put them, let's say 110 stories up on a building, just an observatory deck somewhere in, let's say, New York City, they're petrified. But you can put them 30,000 feet up and they're flying a plane, everything's fine. So
Right.
let's look at one of those, and maybe we could dissect it, and where, maybe in your work, how it traced back to something
Sure.
in somebody's life.
So I had a woman that she loved to travel, and she'd done it for quite a while with flying, and she would get so panic stricken, especially if there was turbulence,
Yeah.
and that she would just feel like she needed to scream, and she'd start crying. And like her husband was with her. She had kind of a supportive person right there, so it wasn't that she was doing it on her own. But in working with her, going back, she had some really I don't know that it's unusual, but she had a lot of events happen in her life that were scary. And she saw her dad fall off an elevated platform and break his neck. He ended up being okay, but and then he had to be life flighted out of the area, things like that, um, and other things within her family, how they functioned were um, they just weren't. I would say helping her like adjust easily as she grew up. So I think sometimes that flying can be feeling a lack of control.
Mm.
So if you're moving in your car and things like that, even if somebody else is driving, it seems almost more controlling than the idea of falling out of the air, maybe.
Right.
But but um but I worked with her for like 4 or 5, maybe 5 sessions, and because she was planning to go down to Mexico, and her fear was growing over time, it was getting worse, so that she would be developing this sense of fear working up to getting onto the plane, or even like a week before, something like that. So and she just loved this place that she would go to, so it was really putting a barrier up for her, and she ended up on her last flight. Even her husband said that there was some turbulence, and she was just like, this is not that big of a deal, you
Right.
know. So I mean, it really changes your perspective with through hypnotherapy as to what's going on, and then dealing with past underlying issues too is really
Well,
helpful.
you certainly identified an underlying issue in her life, seeing her father fall, you know, yeah, a height, call it that, a distance, and then break his back. Whoa, trauma, and then watching him be, life flighted out of there. When it comes to fear, is it reasonable to think that fear usually is there to protect us? It's built in. I've often heard fear is an emotion where it's there to help us, whereby a phobia is more of anxiety and gets in the way of life. Not to say that fear doesn't, but would it be a phobia of flying or would it be a fear of flying? I'm on the fence on that one
Yeah, that's a good question.
because you have a fear of flying, which it's there to protect you, but it's almost unfounded because, when you look at how many times how many airline accidents there are, so far and few based on the number of flights that are out there. Um,
Right.
I don't know. I wonder if it would be a phobia because it's anxiety. You have anxiety, and that's, typically how they define phobia. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think maybe it becomes a phobia when the event itself, when you're thinking about it coming up or what the issues are, it's just so ingrained in you that you can't logically work through it.
Yeah. 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 Okay. I see that now. Where now I have a fear of flying. I'm going to get on the plane, but I kind of a little bit of a fear. Phobia is like, I'm not getting on a plane.
Right,
Just
right. Just
not
overwhelming.
not happening.
Yeah,
Or, eventually if you do, but it has escalated to such a level where now it's impeding on your life. Now it's getting
right.
in the way of life. Even if we go to something, not to minimize, but a spider
Mm-hmm.
that on a smaller scale, but if you have a fear of spiders, you may be afraid to sleep in a cabin.
Sure.
And now that's impeded on your life. Hey, I wanted to go on vacation. We're going camping. I'm not going in a tent. Could be a spider in there.
Yeah,
Uh, whereby, now we go back to looking at it in terms of numbers. How many people get hurt, bitten by spiders? Very far and few between. It's often been said that you're always 8 feet away from a spider. There's one right here. They're all over them. Can't escape them. They're all over the place. So maybe that does turn into a phobia. Your fear of spiders, because now it's getting in the way of you enjoying your life.
yeah, yeah. It limits you. That
Yeah.
I had a woman that she had an intense fear of snakes, to the point that she loved to hike, and like leaves rustling along the hiking
Yeah.
path or something. She was just terrified. She was like, "There's a snake there." And it turns out she, when she was little, she lived on some acreage, and they had an orchard, and they would go into the orchard and do whatever they do in different seasons. And her mom and dad actually had a snake before they had kids. I think it was a big snake, some boa or something. And so they got rid of it once they had kids. So the kids weren't ever turned onto that, but her parents were very comfortable with snakes. And her dad found a nest of baby snakes, and he just picked him up, and then he was kind of running after her with them, just he's kidding, but I think she was about 4. And, that really went together with her concern. But yeah, she had to go out hiking. She loved to hike, and here in Central Oregon's tons of hiking and into the woods and things. And she'd have to have her husband with her, and he would know the signs and triggers of when something was going to happen with her, and he would be really reassuring and things. But it didn't stop her necessarily, but it was very limited. It wasn't enjoyable for her for the most part.
Wow. I can see it, and when I think snakes, I remember my grandmother, chasing a garter snake. And, I didn't have a fear of them, but an awareness, call it that.
Uh-huh.
It's funny you should say that, because if you looked at my computer at home, the screen at this moment, it's snakes of my area in New York. And somebody I'm not even kidding. Somebody did shared a Facebook post where there were copperhead snakes, and it says in the area, and a picture of a daughter's leg all swollen. They're can be deadly, those snakes.
Yeah.
And a picture of like 3 of them going up a tree. And people were saying, is that really in your area? I'm in the Northeast. I actually looked it up, and they are around. So,
Oh man.
yeah, I guess it's just to be aware. But it can challenge you. Now, how does hypnotherapy work? Whatever it may be, whether somebody thinks it's a big phobia, a small phobia, it doesn't matter. It's something that's blocking your life. How do you work with somebody on a hypnotherapy level to kind of clear that out?
So there's a lot of different ways. If you can really identify the onset, like with this woman with her youth, you can take them back to that time, but look at it from uh, a different perspective. So maybe you have them, get down into that trance state, and have them sitting in a movie theater looking at a screen, and the screen's small, and then they can replay that event.
Mm.
And they can adjust the size of the screen, so it could, if it gets too intense, too emotional for them, they can make the screen smaller so it's more tolerable for them. And that works really well.
When it comes to hypnotherapy, we trace back to where the origin is, even back into your childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you find it? Like, if somebody doesn't know, they could have had a situation with a snake, way
Uh-huh.
back, and they don't even know it. They can't remember it, but it's been implanted in their subconscious. How do you find that?
So usually you can say, if you figure out exactly how you feel when it comes up, and I always ask, are there other things that have similar effect on you? And you can take them back, just go back in time to an event and that started it. So usually they can bring up something that's more current. And then as you go back with hypnotherapy, you can have them, you kind of regress by years. You can go back 5 years from now, and 10 years, that kind of
Sure.
thing too. Uh, when something pops up that seems relevant, or is the exact issue. And you can do things too with people, like lift your fingers for yes, not, keep it down for no, as they're going in. And so your yes sign is, raise a finger on your right hand. And then even if they just raise it a tiny bit, you'll know that that's the yes. And then, so if you take them back, go back 5 years, is there any issues in this time span? And they can say yes or no. So you can draw them further into that perspective. And people can actually talk in hypnotherapy. So, if you can't do the signals, then you could have them verbalize.
Oh, totally. In when I was going through hypnotherapy before we met, not for a fear or phobia. I was wide awake, yeah, fully conscious. I could have said, "Stop! I don't want to do this anymore." I didn't
Uh-huh.
because it was interesting, and it was like watching my childhood on TV in my mind. Interestingly, a lot of the images that I saw aren't ones that I've never seen before. Like if I sit here and I thought, all right, let me think back to that time I got bullied, that time this happened, that time I already see it, but it was a different feeling of seeing it under hypnotherapy. Um, and I was literally speaking through it. Of course, sometimes you get emotional. What about somebody that has a fear of needles, fear of blood tests? Kind of a
Hmm.
common one.
Hmm.
I struggle with that one, and I did have one a while back. Um, it's I had a pre-existing one, like not everybody likes needles. And then I had a routine blood test once, and they didn't remove the band on my arm.
Oh,
So I was done. And then the phlebotomist was talking with a coworker, and they're like, me, 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 talking. I'm
uh-huh.
like, waiting, waiting. So she finally comes over and releases it. And I was just like, oh boy. And I felt like I was going to go down.
Oh
So
no.
that was, oh, you're a nurse practitioner. So you get it. Uh,
Yeah.
that made a mark. Now I'm okay with it. But I wonder why people could have a fear of needles, blood tests. What are some of the things that you've uncovered or what that could be?
So, well, needles are clearly invasive, physically invasive. So that's you could say that puts in a fear of being safe, with
Okay.
the procedure. And like I was saying, a lot of these things can be out of perspective. Like, the phlebotomist is not going to try and injure you or
Right.
hurt you,
Sure.
but it's just out of perspective. And then I think it's it being just invasive with
Hmm.
needles.
And a control thing. Like
Yeah,
you said that with the plane and that I could see that. And also a layer deeper here in terms of the control, you not knowing what's going to happen. What if I pass out? What if, I get stuck on the plane? What if? To me, that just goes back to anxiety. You're back in the, anxiety arena once again,
right.
um,
Yeah.
which takes you into, phobia.
When you're overplaying it, you're jumping so far ahead that, this could happen or this could happen or this could happen. And, to just be in that moment. The other thing with hypnotherapy is you can make things go by faster. So you could
Hmm.
say, you're going to be going in for this lab draw and it's going to occur quicker than it ever has. It goes by so fast, that kind of thing that
Hmm.
you just stay completely relaxed through it. I had a, a, a friend of mine that she used to have to fly. Well, she didn't have to, but she went back to Bosnia regularly because her family is from there, and she didn't have any issues with flying other than it would get so boring. It was such a long flight. And so we did some stuff to have her kind of get herself into a hypnotic state as she was getting onto the plane. And then when she got on the plane, it was going to be the most relaxing flight she'd ever had. And, she could fall asleep easily. She could do any other activities she wanted to. And the time would pass just incredibly quickly. And she said it was
Hmm.
like the shortest flight she'd ever had.
So she had a little apprehensiveness or anxiety because it was a long flight and she'd be bored.
Yeah.
How
She was,
interesting.
yeah, it was just like, oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to entertain myself? Whatever that was. But
My
yeah,
gosh.
you can condense time that they experience.
Hmm. I took a 7-hour flight a couple of weeks ago, first time in a long time. That was the best time of my life.
Really?
Because I
Good.
didn't have to do anything. It was almost like now I'm forced to do nothing. I downloaded so many songs. I hardly listened to any of them. I was going to watch movies. I didn't even do that. Tried to sleep going there. Didn't really work. Slept a little bit coming back. But what really, the standout for me, I started listening to certain frequencies, like 528 hertz, which is the frequency of love. turned it down really low, and I got in such a zone. It was like, this is good. I'm just like, all right. Yeah. I don't know if it was hypnotic or whatever. I want to ask you a question, and
Uh-huh.
I'm curious. It's often been said, and I've learned this myself, and it's extremely impactful to live in the moment. And that's kind of what we're talking about here, living in the moment where you won't have that anxiety of thinking what's coming in the future.
Right.
Let's say, the lab draw. What a way to put it though, lab draw. You're such a medical term. Um, where you're anticipating what's going to happen. But if you're right there, they're doing it, in your arm, you're done in a second. But you're thinking, living in the moment. Can you hypnotize somebody to make them more prone to live in the moment and not the past or the future, just more center in the moment? Is that even possible?
Well, I've done that. I've introduced that aspect in a number of situations, like people who are just feel overwhelmed with all the things that are going on in their life and feel like they just want to get rid of that feeling overwhelmed. And they're so stuck in their cycle of whatever they're doing that I've gotten them so like that they in that situation, this person, we did some stuff with, he need to just make even 20 minutes a day that is just entirely his, and just go out and do exactly what makes him feel good, and just take that all in as intensely as he can. And so I think that's really helpful.
Mm, okay. This conversation comes up with people all the time, living in the moment.
Hmm.
But I guess it's a case by case situation, living in the moment. I have, phobia of lab tests. Okay. Well, to get somebody to focus on the moment and not the future. And like to your point, if you're focused on the moment, the lab draws like 20 seconds, maybe, if that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you're extending the time because now you're thinking about the future. So now it's like minutes have gone by. No, it's right here. Same
Right.
thing with the flight situation. Um, Victoria, how do we connect with you? And I know that you can do this virtually.
Right.
I don't think I've ever done hypnotherapy in person. It's always been
Oh,
virtually.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you can do it anywhere on the planet. How do we find you?
You can Google or send me an email at centraloregonhypnotherapy.com, or phone number for my work is 971-221-3730.
Excellent. It is a game changer. I'm a hypnotherapy cheerleader. I tell everybody, this is, and everybody, usually it's the last thing that people look at, the last
Oh,
modality.
yeah.
Should be the first
Yeah.
one. It's so easy. You don't do anything.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
nothing,
And
you
you
don't do
really
anything.
can't do it wrong.
You
So,
can, you just listen. That's it. Just sit back and listen. But you got to get over the fear of thinking that somebody can control your mind and all that stuff. I'm not going to call it crazy stuff. It's founded by things we've seen on TV and entertainment and things like that. Bottom line, it works and it changes lives. Thanks so much for being here today.
you bet. Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll be
Bye.
right back. Hang on.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home.
that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.